Great. Thank you so much for this opportunity. Andrea and I are both very thrilled to be able to connect with the community and have this important conversation. So you can go ahead and dive in to the next slide. We'll start with some grounding in Clorox and who we are. I think most of you are likely familiar with our flagship product, bleach, which was created over 100 years ago and has supported people's health and safety ever since. So taking care of people has really been at our core since day one. But within the past couple of years, we took the opportunity to reflect on and clarify our purpose, to put into words, what is it that really drives us every day? And that purpose is to champion people to be well and thrive every single day. With that as our North Star, that is what all of the work and focus within the enterprise ladders up to. And there's obviously a clear link to ESG, right? People can only thrive when they, their communities, and their planet are all healthy. So we see ESG or sustainability as a critical proof point for bringing this purpose to life. And Alex, I don't know if you were going to bounce to the report, but just a couple of examples where our purpose is illustrated right on the cover. Be well and thrive is the bulk of that purpose statement. On pages 1 and 2 is our CEO's letter, and that is really organized around our purpose. And then, yep, so right there, front and center for her letter. And then we have a whole purpose a section, pages 21 through 28 is where we really do dive into our purpose and our values. I didn't speak to the values when we were on the slide, but those were refreshed around the same time as well to provide clarity on, as we are living our purpose, what's really expected of our people. So if you want to go back to the slides, yeah, and we can go on to the next one. Just the next slide gives a little bit more insight.
Sure. Can I just say that,
yeah.
Sorry to interrupt. Can I just say that any annual report that has ranch dressing on the front cover is going to do well.
We've got a leg up, right? I mean, it's almost not fair. Yeah, totally. Yep. And that's actually a good example, right? I mean, if you look at the brands that are part of the Clorox company, most people aren't aware that this many brands and these brands are under our portfolio. So yes, Hidden Valley Ranch Dressing, Kingsford Charcoal, Burt's Bees Lip Balm, Fresh Step Kitty Litter, a wide array of consumer packaged goods. And in fact, we're in 9 out of 10 US homes. And so that gives us a very unique opportunity to help consumers live more sustainably. The vast majority of our business is in the US, and yep, you can see some of our stats there. Yep, feel free to go on. So as I mentioned, our purpose guides all we do, and that includes our ESG work. Our ESG ambition is that every person at Clorox will contribute to a more sustainable and inclusive world, both every person and every brand. And we decided to organize our approach around these 3 pillars: healthy lives, clean world, thriving communities. That's all underpinned by strong governance, by the way, very important pillar as well. And we arrived at these pillars, these focus areas as part of our materiality assessment. We wanted, and we'll get more into the materiality assessment later on, but it was very important for us to ensure that our focus areas was really grounded in our stakeholder expectations and our biggest impacts as a company. And so, Alex, that was really all. Yeah, I was going to turn it over to Andrea unless there was anything else you wanted to touch on in terms of our purpose or who Clorox is.
No, I think let's continue through some of it now, and maybe if there's time, we can come back to the purpose and how that's lived internally. But I do want to get to some of these other things that I know we're going to get to.
Great.
Well, thrilled to be here. Thanks again for the opportunity. So here I'm going to highlight on a couple of just the key attributes of our report. And so just, holistically, Clorox has a very long-standing commitment to ESG transparency and disclosure. And so, these are some of the more recent initiatives we've taken over the past couple of years. I'd say, like, some of the principles around this would be that we our disclosures are comparable, right? So we really focus on using globally recognized standards and frameworks, and then also aligning with our priority ESG raters and their methodologies. And our disclosures are relevant to our stakeholders. And that's where, again, Sarah's going to talk about the materiality assessment, but we really do have an ongoing dialogue with stakeholders, our key stakeholders, and in particular with investors, which again, I'm really a part of. And then also through our materiality assessment that we have been performing since 2012, that's really informed our strategy. And then lastly, we strive to have high quality ESG data, and that's really for our more priority data that is disclosed in key SEC filings, and we'll get to that in a bit as well. But we do, we have done assurance, external assurance for the past decade, and we have a strategy around that as well.
So Andrea, just in terms of what's on this slide, so when we look at integrating ESG across the reporting suite, it's always a bit of a discussion internally when you talk about integrating ESG into things like these legal documents that apparently can never change, like the proxy statement. So I'm wondering what sort of what were some of the key enhancements that you made when you talk about this enhanced ESG disclosure in the proxy statement?
I'm going to turn this one over to Sarah.
Sure. Yeah, and I think many people on the call are likely aware that the SEC is placing increased focus on ESG disclosures. Last reporting cycle, our fiscal year ends June 30th. So last reporting cycle was the first time that we had a much larger dedicated section to human capital to be more transparent about how we're investing in our people and supporting our people. And we're definitely keeping an eye on what they're proposing and what may come as it relates to climate. So given the integration of more ESG disclosure in report filings, such as the 10K, Andrea and our team has started to work much more closely with our finance team. We have an SEC reporting team, and they have been a great partner in helping strengthen the controls and governance for our ESG data so that we have very good systems and documentation for both our quantitative and our qualitative metrics. So for the last reporting cycle, as I mentioned, we partnered with finance and we identified human capital metrics to be in the 10K. It was a subset of the metrics we reported in our integrated annual report. So that's where the most disclosure happens. But then in terms of what was in the 10K, we were prioritizing those disclosures based on what are our most, our biggest priorities as a business. The strength and the maturity of the data controls, so that, for example, there may have been some disclosures we were considering including, but we didn't feel that we had the robust enough controls to be appropriate to be included in a 10K. And then the third piece was alignment with accepted standards and frameworks. So looking through those lenses, we developed that human capital story for the 10K. In terms of the proxy, there was much less discussion of human capital in the proxy. We didn't have any shareholder proposals based on that topic. And so that just wasn't the vehicle to go in depth on human capital. What we did for the proxy, transitioning from the 10K to the proxy, was to tell our broader story with some of the key, most important metrics at a higher level.
Thanks, Sarah. And we are seeing a couple of questions come up, and these we will get to them, once we've gone through some of these other slides that we know that our guests would like to feature. So just moving onto that, and let's, integrated reporting and integrated thinking is always talked about as a journey. And so I'd love to hear more about Clorox's journey from the beginning.
Yeah. So it really all started when we acquired Burt's Bees in 2007. I think that just should cast a spotlight on some of our sustainability efforts or lack thereof. And so we really started investing heavily and then launched our first corporate responsibility, now known as ESG strategy, in 2010. And then in 2011, we published our first iteration of the integrated annual report. I don't even know if the official framework was around back then, but we started publishing ESG data and metrics in our annual report. And the benefits of that is that it really started helping break down the silos and having our executives to review and sign off on ESG data alongside the financial data. So that really kickstarted our journey, our evolution to 2019, when we launched our first integrated Ignite corporate strategy called Ignite, where the ESG goals were integrated into the corporate strategy. And then that in turn kickstarted or cascaded all of our brands to also start setting their own ESG and sustainability goals.
I think this is interesting. We see it a lot with companies that have a variety of different brands or a variety of different operating divisions or locations. What's the interplay between these corporate ESG goals and the goals at the brand level?
It's a really good question. So when we set our corporate ESG goals, especially the environmental and packaging goals, they were pretty ambitious for us, and we knew that the only way we would be able to achieve them is if they were cascaded to our brands and business units, right? So as part of this overall approach, we have tasked our brands to set their own sustainability agendas, both for social and environmental agendas, right? And then specifically try to set packaging goals if it was feasible and relevant to their stakeholders and if they could actually make an impact.
And then just to build off that a little bit, to expand on what is happening at the brand level, Andrea said it perfectly, right? They are key. The brands are key in delivering on our enterprise level commitments. We're also working closely with the brands to articulate their own approach to sustainability, right? So when you think about Brita water filters and their ability to help provide clean drinking water to marginalized communities, that is a story that they can tell that does not apply to, well, maybe everybody wants Hidden Valley Ranch. Maybe they should explore that, but that is going to be a different articulation of what sustainability means to different brands. So it's kind of happening on a couple of different levels, feeding up to the enterprise, as well as developing commitments and goals that are specific to the brands.
So I think something that's, it comes in, especially when we talk about integrated reporting and how that influences the journey. I think we're actually about to get to, if I'm not right. Yeah. So materiality, like what's in, what's out. So I guess that's a huge topic, especially at the moment. And so I see you've got some content here. Take us through this decision making.
Sure. And as Andrea mentioned, our first one was years ago, and we have refreshed our materiality multiple times since 2012. Our approach this year, well, let me just back up for a second and share why I believe this is so important. It's one thing for Clorox to say, we believe X, Y, and Z are important ESG topics for us to address. And of course, we have a very big stake in what we think should be a priority, but a company can do that without taking into account stakeholder perspectives in a thoughtful and deep way. And so a formal materiality assessment allowed us to step back, work with a consultant, and frankly, that provided another level of objectivity than had we just conducted this ourselves. And looking at gathering input from external stakeholders, gathering input. So I guess, let me talk about the process then. So we looked at internally, what are our goals? What is our strategy? What have we done in the past? Then from an external perspective, we looked at our peers' efforts, our business unit peers' efforts, of course, reports, our key raters, reporting frameworks. And then the third layer, which was really helpful, was an online scanning of social and digital media. And that provided more data that helped us identify and prioritize ESG topics that were most relevant to our company. And so when we layered on top of that, both internal and external interviews, we felt really good about the outputs of that, right? And you can go to the next slide for perspective on, so this is where we landed in terms of the ranking, if you will, of the ESG topics into, as you can see, high, higher, and highest. If something's on the list, it's important. So there we didn't want to say low, medium, and high. So this is,
I was just going to ask, because this tiering approach is interesting, just because in a lot of times you see a matrix or something of some kind where there's some sort of implied scoring of like, GHG emissions is 6 and ethical and transparent governance is 5. And did you try that? Have you done that in the past, or has this always been?
So I will say the previous materiality assessment that Clorox did, it had the more traditional XY axis that I think you're probably envisioning, right, in your mind, plotting according to importance to the company, importance to stakeholders, or something along those lines. But And that can be a very helpful visual representation of the outputs. We chose this tiered approach because we felt what was most important and actionable to us as a company was to understand directionally what is most important, what's, tier 2, and then what's tier 3 after that. Absolutely, we had a quantitative element to, determining which one was in each bucket. So yes to having a quantitative, kind of scoring mechanism. But in terms of how do we think and act on that information, it didn't feel very productive to say, well, this should be a 6 and this should be a 5, or this should be number 4, and this should be number 7, or scooch that dot up a little bit, right? That just felt like it was getting in the weeds and that wasn't going to be very helpful.
Yeah, I mean, and I think that's interesting because you are seeing some of the new GRI standards actually are moving away from the matrix, right? Like, oops, sorry, not the movie reference. But they're not recommending it anymore. They just say threshold and the like. But I also note that up here, GRI was not used, doesn't seem to have been used in FY21, but it did appear previously in your journey. So was there some decisions made about which frameworks to align with?
Yes. Andrea, do you want to speak to that?
Yeah. So we have been using the GRI framework since we first launched our integrated report, 2011. It was, I think, 2019, we decided to introduce the SASB standard, and so reporting against that based on feedback from our investors. And then the following year, every year, I mentioned it's a journey, and we're really taking a very thoughtful approach to how we report. And the following year, we realized that we spend a lot of resources, right, creating the GRI report, and our primarily US-based stakeholders weren't as interested in the GRI report. So we decided to stop producing the full report. We definitely still use the GRI criteria as a foundational element of a lot of our data and reporting.
And so you said that investors were less, how did you know they weren't interested in it?
We had direct conversations with a lot of them, or looked at their methodologies, or we also looked at ESG raters and to see if how much they cared about GRI.
Okay. So something else that I'm interested in, I think, any large organizations, and, Clorox is one with a very diverse product line. The challenge is how to create an integrated report that's not 1 billion pages long. And so how do you go in, especially because you've got quite a diverse range of products as well. It's not just like one thing that you just happen to be a big business doing. And so there's a variety of different uses, materials, impacts. How do you decide what's in and what's out? Beyond just from a product or operational perspective, much less a material topic perspective.
I'll take a stab at that, and Sarah definitely weigh in. So the materiality assessment it's really important to informing what goes in and out. We try to focus on the priority tier 1 topics. We also focus on ESG raters, our tier 1 ESG raters that we really care about. We try to make sure that we address some of their key disclosure requirements. And what else? What am I missing?
No, just that it's an ongoing discussion. I mean, this year we're planning our annual report and trying to think through content and length and what's right and what's appropriate. And I would say, in addition to what Andrea spoke to, another just part of the decision-making process, to be frank, is, we want to speak to our strategy. We want to speak to the ESG priorities, as Andrea mentioned. And then it's a question of how much detail do we want to go into, right? I think that's where you can get into these reports that are hundreds and hundreds of pages long, because it's a lot of information, when, maybe we could right size the level of detail that's included in the report. So again, this is ongoing conversations. And we also see our corporate website as a very important disclosure channel as well. So we don't feel that we need to get every single little detail in the annual report. We do have other vehicles for being transparent about ESG and other business strategy, priorities and results.
And the report, the way we view the report is it is to document what has happened in the past fiscal year, right? And as Sarah mentioned, the website documents everything else, the processes, the structures in place. And so, if you want to actually jump to the report, you go to our Ignite Strategy Overview sections, page 4. So last fiscal year, is just an example of what we're talking about, we decided to really blow out the strategy part of our report and make it quite long. And you can just scroll down, you can see how long it is between the strategy overview, the strategy update, and then the scorecard. And so the reason why it was strategically long last year is because it was the first year that we decided to, or that we were able to report true progress against our Ignite strategy, which was set in late 2019. So yeah, so I think, you know, whether or not it's that long this year remains to be seen.
Now, the 30 June reporting period, you know, I don't know how many other Australians are on this call, but that is the standard over there. So we're quite familiar with this disjointed view of, oh, you said something in 2019, but you can't report on it until the end of 2021. Oops.
Exactly. Yeah.
But it's a headache for all the ESG ratings too. Just one last one for me, and I know like people on the call have probably, you know, either fallen asleep because of my voice, not because of yours, of course. And so assurance, you know, that's always kind of where the rubber hits the road here, in terms of, you know, great, we can all publish things, but now we're going to have people coming in and looking at our controls and such. So has the process been of value to Clorox beyond just verifying data externally?
For sure.
It has been extreme. Yeah, and I'll let Andrea speak to that.
Yeah, it's, I think I'll go over some of the benefits, you know, so we use assurance for, focusing and giving credibility to our priority ESG metrics that are most valued to our stakeholders, and also are most relevant to our strategy or are reported in official like SEC documents. That's our intent, right? That's where we're moving toward in our assurance strategy. There are also some other benefits to getting external assurance. For example, in the past, we have set customized metrics, right? And so we would rely on our assurance partner. I believe it's well known, they're EY, they're on this call, hello, to help validate that, you know, this customized metric, if possible. And if it's not possible, we would not get it assured. So it gives additional credibility to that. And then, yeah, I believe those are the main points. And I think just overall, it really just, it signals our dedication and commitment to high quality ESG data.
Okay.
Absolutely, and I just see the note here that's interested in assurance. If you do want to jump, it's page 82 that lists the metrics that are assured.